Her true story, from Ohio. He was my husband, and also the father of my grandson. Mama, I'm not clean anymore. I don't deserve to exist. I was rinsing dishes in the kitchen when I heard her scream. Not the usual teen frustration, not even heartbreak. This scream came from the hollow part of the soul where things rot when they've been buried too long. I ran, still clutching a wet dish towel. Upstairs, I found her on the floor, knees drawn to her chest, hair tangled over her face like a veil of shame. My daughter, my only child, Tara. She looked up at me like a wounded animal, red-eyed and trembling. I dropped to my knees, cradling her as if she was 5 again, not 17. It's okay, I whispered, stroking her back. Mama's here. You don't have to be afraid. She didn't speak after that. Not for a long time. I sat with her on the floor for nearly an hour. Eventually, she fell asleep in my arms, her body still jerking from leftover sobs. That night changed everything. I just didn't know it yet. My name is Linda. I was 18 when I had Tara. Her father disappeared before she was born, and I spent my life working the night shift at a hospital in Ohio to give her what I never had: security, education, dignity. When Tara was 17, I met Daniel. He was soft-spoken, a little older than me, a widower. He owned an appliance repair shop and wore suspenders that made him look like he belonged in another decade. He called me ma'am on our first date and brought flowers to our second. He always held the door, always smiled. I have a daughter, I told him. Even better, he said. I always wanted a daughter. We married in a small church in Akron. Tara wore a blue dress and didn't smile once. I thought it was teenage angst, maybe resentment. She didn't even look at Daniel during the ceremony. If only I had listened to that silence. If only I'd seen what her eyes were screaming. A month after that night on the bedroom floor, Tara sat across from me at the kitchen table, pale and shaking. I knew before she spoke. I'm pregnant, she said. The words dropped like a hammer. I couldn't breathe. Who's the father? I asked gently. She shook her head. I can't. I just can't. Tara, please. If you're scared, I'll help you, but I need to know. She bit her lip until it bled. You'll hate me. You'll hate me forever. I could never hate you. She never said his name, but the terror in her eyes spoke louder than words. I supported her anyway. Took her to every appointment. Sat with her during therapy. She wanted to keep the baby. I know it's wrong, she whispered once, but it's still mine, and I want to protect it, even if I hate myself. I nodded. Because what else could a mother do when her daughter is falling apart? Jonah was born one quiet autumn morning. I held him first. He was tiny, fragile, perfect. Eyes deep brown, curls dark as midnight. Daniel stood beside me and smiled. He looks just like you, Linda. At the time, I thought he meant it kindly. Now I know it was mockery. For the next few years, life became oddly normal. Tara distanced herself. She was still a good mother. Fed Jonah, held him, kissed him goodnight, but she carried sadness like a second skin. Depression came and went in waves. She stopped painting, stopped writing. She avoided Daniel at all costs. Why don't you talk to him? I asked once. She stared at her plate. He's not who you think he is. What do you mean? But she clammed up, every single time. Jonah grew. Daniel doted on him. Too much sometimes. Always eager to take him places. Hug him, kiss him, whisper things in his ear. I thought he was being a loving step-grandfather. Now the memory curdles my stomach. One evening when Jonah was 3, I caught Tara crying into her journal. I reached for it, and she slammed it shut. Don't, she hissed. Please, Mama, just don't. I didn't read it, not then, but I should have. And then, it happened. Sarah died when Jonah was 5, a drug overdose. She'd relapsed after a long stretch of sobriety. The autopsy ruled it accidental. I knew better. Her pain had finally swallowed her whole. In the days after her death, I wandered like a ghost through our house. One morning, I opened her closet and found it beneath a stack of baby clothes, wrapped in a sweatshirt, her journal, and a letter. It was addressed to me. Mama, I'm sorry. I tried to live. For Jonah, for you. But I can't carry this anymore. Daniel isn't who you think he is. He's Jonah's father. I never wanted you to find out like this, but I knew you would, someday. He said no one would believe me. He said I was already broken, already dirty. But Jonah is not a mistake. He's the only good thing I've ever done. I love you. I'm so sorry. Tara, I dropped the letter, screamed so loud my voice shattered. My knees gave out on the hallway floor. I crawled to the bathroom and threw up until nothing was left. Then I sat there, staring at my reflection, and said aloud, I married a monster. That's when I knew this wasn't over, it was just beginning. After Tara's passing, I found myself thrust into a role I hadn't anticipated, raising Jonah as my own. He was only 5, a tender age where memories are just beginning to take root. I poured all my love into him, determined to shield him from the shadows of our family's past. Daniel, my husband, seemed to embrace Jonah with an affection that bordered on obsession. He was attentive, always eager to spend time with the boy, teaching him to ride a bike, reading bedtime stories, and attending every school event. At first, I was grateful for his involvement, believing it was his way of coping with Tara's death. However, as time went on, I noticed a certain intensity in Daniel's interactions with Jonah. He was overly protective, quick to discipline, and often dismissed my concerns about giving the child some independence. There were moments when Jonah would flinch at Daniel's raised voice or retreat into silence after their time together. I chalked it up to the challenges of parenting a grieving child. Jonah, for his part, was a quiet boy. He had Tara's eyes, deep and expressive, and a contemplative nature that made him seem older than his years. He rarely spoke about his mother, and when he did, it was with a mixture of longing and confusion. As Jonah grew, so did my unease. There were subtle signs, a reluctance to be alone with Daniel, nightmares that left him screaming in the night, and drawings that depicted dark, unsettling scenes. I began to question the dynamics in our home, but every time I broached the subject with Daniel, he deflected or became defensive. I sought counsel from friends and professionals, trying to piece together the puzzle. Was Jonah's behavior a manifestation of grief, or was there something more sinister at play? The more I delved, the more I realized how little I truly knew about the man I had married. One afternoon, while cleaning out the attic, I stumbled upon a box of Tara's belongings. Among her journals and sketches, I found a letter addressed to me. With trembling hands, I unfolded the paper and began to read. Mama, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to protect Jonah. I tried to be strong, but the weight of my secret became too much to bear. Daniel is not who he pretends to be. He hurt me in ways I can't describe, and Jonah is the result of that pain. I couldn't bring myself to tell you while I was alive, but you deserve to know the truth. Please keep Jonah safe. Love, Tara. The words blurred as tears streamed down my face. A cold realization settled over me. The man I had trusted, the man who had become a father figure to my grandson, was the very source of our family's torment. In that moment, the pieces clicked into place. Daniel's overbearing nature, Jonah's fear, Tara's depression. It all stemmed from a betrayal so profound, it shattered the foundation of our lives. I knew what I had to do. Armed with Tara's letter and a newfound resolve, I approached the authorities. The ensuing investigation unearthed evidence that corroborated Tara's claims. Daniel was arrested and charged with multiple offenses, his facade of respectability crumbling under the weight of his crimes. The trial was a harrowing experience, but I stood firm, testifying to the truth and honoring Tara's memory. Daniel was convicted and sentenced to prison, a small measure of justice for the pain he had inflicted. In the aftermath, Jonah and I began the slow process of healing. I enrolled him in therapy, and together we navigated the complexities of our shared trauma. Over time, Jonah found solace in creative expression, channeling his emotions into art and writing. Years passed, and Jonah blossomed into a compassionate and insightful young man. He pursued a career in education, determined to make a positive impact on the lives of others. We established a tradition called Truth Dinner, an annual gathering where we shared stories, honored Tara's legacy, and reaffirmed our commitment to honesty and resilience. One evening, during a truth dinner, Jonah stood before our assembled friends and family, holding the letter his mother had written. I am the product of a painful past, he began, but I refuse to let that define me. My grandmother's unwavering love and courage have shown me the power of truth and the importance of confronting darkness with light. I carry my mother's strength within me, and I vow to break the cycle of silence. As he spoke, I felt a profound sense of pride and hope. Our journey had been fraught with sorrow, but through it all, we had emerged stronger. bound by love and an unyielding commitment to truth. The years that followed Tara's death were a blur of grief and routine. I threw myself into raising Jonah, pouring all my love and energy into him. He was a bright child, curious and kind, with his mother's deep brown eyes. But there was a shadow that lingered, a sense of unease that I couldn't quite place. One night, I found Jonah sitting on the floor of his room, clutching a drawing. It was a crude sketch of a man with a twisted smile looming over a small figure curled into a ball. When I asked him about it, he shrugged and said it was just a monster from his dreams. I wanted to believe him, but something in his eyes told me there was more to the story. As Jonah grew older, he became more withdrawn. He flinched at sudden movements and avoided being alone with Daniel. I began to notice bruises on his arms and legs, which he always attributed to accidents at school or on the playground. But the explanations felt rehearsed, and the injuries too frequent. One evening, I overheard a conversation between Jonah and Daniel. Daniel's voice was low and menacing, and Jonah's responses were barely audible. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone sent chills down my spine. When I confronted Daniel, he dismissed it as a misunderstanding, claiming he was merely disciplining the boy. But the fear in Jonah's eyes told a different story. Determined to uncover the truth, I began to observe more closely. I noticed how Jonah would tense up whenever Daniel entered the room, how he avoided physical contact, and how he seemed to carry an invisible weight on his small shoulders. I started documenting these observations, keeping a journal of incidents and behaviors that raised red flags. One day, while cleaning the attic, I stumbled upon a box of Tara's belongings. Among her journals and sketches, I found a letter addressed to me. With trembling hands, I unfolded the paper and began to read. "Mama, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to protect Jonah. I tried to be strong, but the weight of my secret became too much to bear. Daniel is not who he pretends to be. He hurt me in ways I can't describe. And Jonah is the result of that pain. I couldn't bring myself to tell you while I was alive, but you deserve to know the truth. Please keep Jonah safe. Love, Tara." The words blurred as tears streamed down my face. A cold realization settled over me. The man I had trusted, the man who had become a father figure to my grandson, was the very source of our family's torment. In that moment, the pieces clicked into place. Daniel's overbearing nature, Jonah's fear, Tara's depression, it all stemmed from a betrayal so profound, it shattered the foundation of our lives. I knew what I had to do. Armed with Tara's letter and a newfound resolve, I approached the authorities. The ensuing investigation unearthed evidence that corroborated Tara's claims. Daniel was arrested and charged with multiple offenses, his facade of respectability crumbling under the weight of his crimes. The trial was a harrowing experience, but I stood firm, testifying to the truth and honoring Tara's memory. Daniel was convicted and sentenced to prison, a small measure of justice for the pain he had inflicted. In the aftermath, Jonah and I began the slow process of healing. I enrolled him in therapy, and together we navigated the complexities of our shared trauma. Over time, Jonah found solace in creative expression, channeling his emotions into art and writing. Years passed, and Jonah blossomed into a compassionate and insightful young man. He pursued a career in education, determined to make a positive impact on the lives of others. We established a tradition called Truth Dinner, an annual gathering where we shared stories, honored Tara's legacy, and reaffirmed our commitment to honesty and resilience. One evening, during a truth dinner, Jonah stood before our assembled friends and family, holding the letter his mother had written. "I am the product of a painful past," he began. "But I refuse to let that define me. My grandmother's unwavering love and courage have shown me the power of truth and the importance of confronting darkness with light. I carry my mother's strength within me, and I vow to break the cycle of silence." As he spoke, I felt a profound sense of pride and hope. Our journey had been fraught with sorrow, but through it all, we had emerged stronger, bound by love and an unyielding commitment to truth. Tara was 25 when she died. The official cause was overdose. The paramedics said she likely didn't even feel it. Her body simply gave up after years of fighting demons it was never meant to carry. But I knew better. It wasn't the pills that killed my daughter. It was silence. It was shame. It was Daniel. I remember the way her room looked the morning after. Still, dusty, like even the air didn't want to move. There was a stale smell of perfume and baby powder, and her blanket was folded too neatly, as if she knew she wouldn't be coming back. Jonah was at school. I sent him off without telling him. I told him his mom wasn't feeling well and that we'd talk later. I walked into her room and stood still, hands at my sides, not ready to touch anything. There was something sacred about the mess she left behind. It felt like touching it would erase her for good. Then, on her dresser, tucked beneath a photo of her and Jonah, I saw an envelope. It had my name on it. My heart stopped. My name, in her handwriting. With shaking fingers, I picked it up. The paper was thick, heavy. Inside, just one page. Neat writing, no scratches, no hesitation. It read, "Mama, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I know this will hurt you. I didn't want to leave you and Jonah, but I couldn't stay anymore. The weight of what I've carried, I just can't bear it. I tried to be a good mom. I really did. But every time I look at Jonah, I see, not him. I see what was done to me. And it's not his fault. He's perfect. He's beautiful. But I'm not. I'm broken. The man you married, Danielle, he is Jonah's father." I didn't know how to say it. I was just a child. I said nothing because I thought maybe you'd stop loving me. Or worse, blame me. Jonah is not a mistake, but the way he came into this world was, and I can't keep living with that truth buried inside. Please, Mama, take care of him. Raise him with the love you always gave me. Don't let him grow up thinking he's shame. He's not. He's your second chance to get it right. I love you. Always have. I just couldn't carry it anymore. Tara. The paper slipped from my hands and fluttered to the floor. I sank to my knees and pressed my palms to the carpet, trying to breathe. It felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. Daniel, Jonah, my daughter. The walls around me pulsed with the sound of my heartbeat. The world blurred into silence. He was my husband. He was the man who stood beside me when Jonah was born, the man who said, "He looks like you." Now I understood why. Not because of genetics, but because guilt knows how to smile. I sat on the floor of Tara's room until the sun went down. No tears came, just an aching hollowness. My mind ran in circles, trying to deny what was undeniable. I thought back to the signs I'd ignored. Tara never liked Daniel. She never called him Dad. She avoided him in the kitchen, the living room, anywhere they'd be alone. She had panic attacks. She couldn't breastfeed. She said she felt disconnected. And still, I told myself it was just postpartum, just hormones. I didn't see what was right in front of me. The worst part wasn't what Daniel did. It was that I had trusted him. I had brought him into our home. I had left my daughter alone with him, and now she was gone. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear down the walls, burn the house, do something, anything to make the guilt stop. But all I could do was sit there, frozen. Then I looked at Jonah's picture. 8 years old, missing tooth, gap-toothed grin, chocolate on his cheek, holding up a drawing of me, Tara, and him under a rainbow. I picked up the letter again. Don't let him grow up thinking he's shame. I pressed it to my chest. That was the promise I made that night. To protect Jonah, to break the silence, to finish the fight my daughter started, and to make sure that the man who stole everything from her would never take anything again. For 3 days I said nothing. Not to Jonah, not to Daniel, not even to myself. I carried Tara's letter in the inside pocket of my coat like a second heart, beating and broken and burning with every breath I took. I moved through the house like a ghost, made dinner, packed Jonah's lunch, folded laundry with hands that trembled. I wasn't ready. I needed to see him with clear eyes. Daniel, the man who kissed me every night, the man who once fixed our broken washing machine without a word of complaint, who mowed the neighbor's lawn when they were sick, who tucked Jonah into bed and left the hallway light on, just in case. I had to look at him and see a monster. But first, I had to be sure, so I watched. I paid attention to what I'd never noticed before, the way his eyes lingered on Jonah when the boy was quiet, the way he avoided Tara's photo on the wall, the tension in his jaw whenever Jonah laughed too loud, asked too many questions. Daniel had always been loving, but sometimes, in retrospect, too exacting, too precise in how Jonah should behave. No running, no second helpings, no messy jokes. It had felt like old-fashioned discipline. Now it felt like control. I remembered Tara's voice that last night she screamed in her room. I'm not clean anymore. I don't deserve to exist. And Daniel hadn't asked a single question about it. Not one. The grief that had nearly drowned me began to boil. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I waited. Then, on the 5th evening, as Jonah was out playing basketball with his friends, I made a pot of chamomile tea. Daniel sat at the kitchen table reading the newspaper, calm, steady, like the world hadn't just collapsed under my feet. I sat across from him, slid a cup toward him. "Thanks," he murmured, folding the page down. I watched him sip. He always took his tea lukewarm. He blew on it 3 times first, always. He did that now too. 3 short puffs, then a slow sip. It was like watching someone else's husband. "I've been thinking about Tara a lot lately," I said, keeping my voice light. "I still can't believe she's gone." Daniel didn't flinch. "It's tragic," he said, "but some people, they're just too soft for this world." I clenched my hands under the table. "Do you think she ever tried to tell anyone anything?" I asked. "Like, if she was hurt, would anyone have believed her?" Daniel looked up slowly. His eyes were still the same pale green I used to find calming. Now they looked like algae sitting on something rotten. "Some things," he said, "are better left buried." His voice was calm, too calm. I pressed further. "But what if it was something bad, something someone did to her?" He looked at me for a long time, and then, with a thin smile, he said, "Even truth rots when it's dug up too late. It poisons everything." I felt cold rush up my spine, but I didn't blink. I'd hidden a recorder in the fruit bowl beside the bananas. The red light was still on. I stood up. "You want more tea?" I asked. He nodded. "That'd be nice." I poured the tea with a steady hand. My heart was hammering, my palms were slick, but my face, I kept it soft, loving, like always. That night, when he went to bed, I took the recorder and played it back twice. I sat on the back porch with the stars overhead and Tara's letter beside me. The two together, his words, her pain, created a kind of evidence no courtroom could ignore, but I needed more, so I went through the attic. Every box Tara had once touched, I opened. Every notebook, every journal. I didn't stop to cry when I found old baby clothes, little drawings signed in crayon. I was hunting for her voice, and I found it. In the back of a floral diary from her high school years, behind a taped photo of her prom dress, were 3 entries. One was dated 9 months before Jonah was born. He came into my room again. Mama was at work. I didn't scream. I just watched the ceiling and tried not to leave my body. I think I died a little. "I'm so sorry, God. Please don't let Mama find out." The second read. "I missed my period again. I can't tell Mama. I can't tell anyone. He says no one would believe me, that I'd be ruining everything if I spoke." And the third. "Jonah is moving inside me, kicking. But I can't look at my stomach without wanting to scream. I pray every day to love this baby, but I also pray that one day someone will know the truth." I printed them out. I made copies of the audio file. I took it all to the police. The detective on duty was a woman named Sergeant Alvarez. She listened in silence. When the tape stopped, she didn't look at me. She just stood up and said, "Wait here." 10 minutes later, she came back with a warrant request for Daniel's arrest. "Do you want to be the one to tell him?" she asked. I shook my head. "I want him to hear it from someone he didn't marry." They came for him the next morning. Daniel didn't resist. He didn't shout. He looked at me, once, as they cuffed him in the driveway, and said, "I always knew you were too smart." I didn't reply, but my silence was the beginning of his sentence. The morning they took Daniel away, the neighbors watched from behind their curtains. Nobody said a word. Not then. But by nightfall, the whispers had started. He was such a good man, always polite, always helpful, eating for free. Why would she make up something like that? And I let them talk. I let them speculate and spin, because I had no interest in clearing my name in the court of public opinion. I was preparing for the real one. The detective assigned to the case was careful, deliberate. She interviewed Jonah, but gently. She never mentioned paternity, only asked what he remembered of growing up. "He was always strict," Jonah said. "Not abusive, just cold. Like, I annoyed him." "And your mother?" Jonah swallowed hard. "She cried a lot, even before I was born. I never knew why." The evidence mounted quietly. Tara's diary entries, her suicide note, the audio recording from the kitchen that night. A DNA test wasn't needed. Tara's letter was clear enough. And given Daniel's silence and refusal to answer questions, the DA moved forward with formal charges: statutory rape, incest, endangerment of a minor, coercion. He was 70, Jonah was 20, and I was somewhere between 50 and 1,000 years old, it felt. The trial date came in late spring. The courthouse smelled of lemon cleaner and fear. Jonah didn't come. I didn't ask him to. He'd already lived through the truth. I wouldn't make him relive it for strangers. Daniel's lawyer tried to downplay everything. "These are decades-old claims," she said. "There's no physical evidence." But the judge, a woman in her 60s, interrupted her. "Rape often leaves no bruises on the outside," she said, "especially when the victim is a child in her own home." When it was my turn to take the stand, I felt the room hold its breath. I looked Daniel in the eye. His hair was thinner now. His hands shook a little, but his eyes were the same, pale, unreadable. "I was 45 when I met him," I said. "I thought he was kind. I thought he wanted to be a father to my child." I took a breath. My throat burned, but I did not cry. "I invited him into our home, into our lives. I said yes to a man who raped my daughter and fathered a child with her, without ever showing his shame. I called him husband. I let him hold my grandson." My voice cracked, but I didn't fall. "He is not just a liar, not just a predator. He is a coward who hid behind charm and used the trust of a child to violate her body and her mind." I glanced at the jury. One woman dabbed her eyes with a tissue. A man clenched his jaw. "I cannot bring my daughter back," I said, "but I can tell her story, and I can promise my grandson that silence will never be his inheritance." Then I stepped down. Daniel never testified. He sat there, head low, as if sleepwalking through his own reckoning. After closing arguments, the jury deliberated for only 4 hours. When they returned, the judge called the room to order. "In the case of the state versus Daniel Benson," she said, "we find the defendant guilty on all counts." Daniel did not react, but I did. I let out a loudly, like I'd been holding my breath for 20 years. The judge's sentence was clear and final. "Daniel Benson, you are hereby sentenced to 25 years in state prison without possibility of parole." Then she paused. "But before I close these proceedings," she added, "let me say this. Jonah Benson is not the result of shame. He is the result of strength, and he is the victim of a double betrayal, from a mother too afraid and a man too monstrous." The room was silent. She looked directly at me. "You may have raised him in the shadow of a lie, Mrs. Thomas, but now, because of you, he can live in the light of truth." I walked out of the courtroom with the sun on my face. My hands were trembling, but they were also free. I had spent years cooking dinner for a man who'd destroyed my child, but now I had said her name, Tara. This time, everyone had heard it. Jonah was 20 when he asked about the letter. He had always been an observant boy, quiet, kind, thoughtful, in ways that made people underestimate how much he noticed. When he was 10, he found an injured dove in the backyard and spent 3 weeks nursing it back to health. When he was 15, he took a summer job at the library just to help pay for groceries during a tight patch. And when he turned 20, he found a folded paper tucked behind the attic insulation while helping me clean out boxes. It wasn't the letter, but it was from Tara. A torn journal page, a paragraph dated 2 months before her death. "Some nights, I sit by the crib and wonder what kind of man Jonah will become. Will he smile like mine? Will he have the patience of a saint? I love him. I do. But sometimes I look at him and see him. I try to push the guilt down, but it's in my marrow." Jonah brought the paper downstairs. His face was unreadable. "What is this?" he asked. I didn't lie. I couldn't anymore. "Come sit, baby," I said, patting the kitchen table. The room smelled of banana bread, still warm from the oven. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked at a squirrel. It was an ordinary afternoon, but everything was about to become extraordinary. I poured us both tea. I waited until he sat. Then I placed my hand over his. "This paper," I began, "is from your mother's journal. It wasn't meant to be found, but now that it has been, I think it's time we talk." He didn't flinch, just nodded. And so I began, not with Tara's death, not with the trial, but with her as a baby, my baby. How she'd come into the world screaming, fists clenched, full of fight. How her father had walked out before she even opened her eyes. How I worked 3 jobs to buy her first bike. How she hated peas, loved thunderstorms, played piano with one hand while writing poems with the other. How at 17, she stopped smiling. How I thought it was just adolescence. And then, Daniel, I told Jonah everything. From the moment I met him, to the day he moved in, to the way Tara changed. Slowly, almost imperceptibly after that. I told him about the pregnancy, the silence, the breakdown. I told him about the letter, about Daniel, about the truth. For a while he just sat there. Then he stood. His shoulders trembled. His jaw locked. He picked up the ceramic mug in front of him and threw it against the wall. It shattered into 100 pieces, shards of porcelain ricocheting off the floor like bullets. I began. But he cut me off. No, he said. You don't apologize. Not you. His chest rose and fell with ragged breath. Then he collapsed into the chair and buried his face in his hands, and sobbed, deep, guttural sobs that came from a place words couldn't reach. I let him cry. I didn't touch him, didn't try to fix it. I just sat and waited, like the silence was a quilt we both needed to wrap around our wounds. After what felt like hours, he looked up, eyes red, voice raw. I'm not dirty, he whispered. Right? I reached across the table and cupped his face in both hands. No, I said. You are not. You never were. You are not a mistake. You are not a curse. You are not your grandfather's sin. He nodded slowly. Then, why did it feel like I was never whole? He asked. Like something inside me always knew something was off. Because the truth, I said, has a way of whispering even when no one says a word. He wiped his face, picked up a piece of the broken mug and turned it in his fingers. Was it hard? He asked. Telling me? The hardest thing I've ever done, I said. But not telling you would have been worse. He nodded again. Then I want to change my name. I blinked. To what? To Thomas, he said. That was Mom's last name, right? I nodded. I don't want to carry his name anymore, he said. I want to carry hers. My throat tightened. I stood up, crossed the room, and hugged him. He was taller than me now, broader, but when I wrapped my arms around him, he leaned into me, like he did when he was 5 and scraped his knees. I'm proud of you, I whispered. I'm proud of her, he replied. She kept going, even when it hurt. We spent the rest of the night cleaning up the broken mug, then cooking dinner together. Spaghetti with too much garlic bread and a banana pie for dessert. That night, he filled out the paperwork. And 3 weeks later, Jonah Benson officially became Jonah Thomas. A new name, a reclaimed legacy, the beginning of a new truth. Linda turned 70 on a warm spring afternoon in Ohio. The daffodils bloomed early that year, and the pear tree outside her kitchen window, Tara's favorite, was heavy with white petals. Jonah had planned a quiet celebration. Banana bread, tea with too much honey, and a stack of poems he'd saved just for her. They lived together now in a 2-bedroom cottage on the edge of town. Linda liked to say it smelled like safety, a blend of cinnamon, warm laundry, and the faintest hint of lavender from the sachets she kept in the drawers. Jonah, now a high school literature teacher, had a rhythm to his life that Linda cherished. He read the newspaper aloud in the mornings, graded essays with a red pen he never pressed too hard, and once a year, on the anniversary of his mother's death, they hosted something called the Truth Dinner. It had started by accident. One night, over roast chicken and mashed potatoes, Jonah had asked, "What's something you've never said out loud before?" Linda blinked, caught off guard. "I hated Father's Day for 20 years, she admitted. He nodded. "I used to think I wasn't allowed to laugh too loud," he confessed, "because happy people didn't come from people like us." They laughed, then cried, and that night they decided to make it a tradition. Every April 12th, they invited friends, students, neighbors, anyone who needed to speak. No recording, no judgment, just a meal and a microphone. The rule was simple. Tell one truth, any truth, especially the one you thought no one would believe. By the 5th year, the event had outgrown their kitchen. Jonah moved it to the school auditorium. He even got permission from the principal to turn it into a community outreach program. This year, Linda made 3 loaves of banana bread. The line for slices stretched down the hall. Jonah adjusted the microphone stand, glanced at his note cards, then cleared his throat. The room quieted. He looked out at the sea of students, teachers, and strangers. Then he began. "My name is Jonah Thomas," he said, "and for most of my life, I believed I was just lucky." He paused. "I had a strong grandmother, a warm home, and a second chance after a lot of pain I didn't remember." He took a breath. "But the truth is, I'm not just the result of love. I'm also the result of a betrayal. A deep, terrible betrayal that shattered my family before I even knew how to walk. He looked at the back row, where Linda sat, hands folded, eyes misty. My mother, Tara, was a beautiful soul, broken too young, taken advantage of by someone the world thought was decent. That man was also my biological father. Gasps rippled across the room. Jonah didn't flinch. He held up the letter, Tara's letter. I found this when I was 20. My grandmother, who raised me, fought for me, believed in me, sat me down and told me everything. She didn't lie. She didn't soften it. He unfolded the paper, and tonight, with her permission, I want to read it. Not to shame, but to honor. His voice trembled, but only once. Jonah, my sweet boy, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't carry the truth anymore. But I need you to know something. You are not a curse. You are not a mistake. You are mine. And I loved you from the moment I knew you were inside me. I didn't choose how you came to be, but I chose to love you anyway. The silence was heavy, but it didn't feel like judgment. It felt like reverence. Jonah folded the letter and looked up. I am the result of a mistake, he said. But my grandmother, she made me believe I was worthy anyway. She gave me a name, a future, and most of all, a truth I could live with. He stepped back from the mic. The applause was thunderous. Some students stood. A few teachers wept. And in the back row, Linda closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her like a benediction. That night, back home, Jonah went to bed early. Linda stayed in the kitchen, humming a tune Tara used to love. She took out the ripe bananas from the basket, mashed them gently, mixed in the flour, the sugar, the eggs. Each stir was a memory. Tara's laugh at age 8, her tears at 16, her whisper, "Mama, I'm not clean anymore," echoing even now. She poured the batter into a pan and placed it in the oven. The scent filled the cottage slowly, sweet, familiar, whole. Linda stood by the window, watching the stars blink, one by one, into the night sky. Jonah had once said, "Truth doesn't fix everything, Grandma, but it lets you breathe again." She understood now. Some truths are bitter. Some are impossible. But silence, that was the flavor she'd grown tired of. Tonight, her kitchen didn't smell of sorrow. It smelled of banana bread, of truth, of survival. And as she sat down with a warm slice and a cup of tea, Linda whispered to the empty room, "The truth can be bitter, but living without it, that's what's truly unbearable. If you've ever swallowed tears over secrets no one believed you'd dare to speak, then I'm here to say, speak, and let me listen. I'm not a writer. I don't need a stage. I'm just a woman who's lived long enough to know. Silence doesn't protect you. It protects the ones who hurt you. Maybe they told you, don't make a fuss. Let the past stay buried. Everyone makes mistakes. Just forgive and move on. But I say this, the truth doesn't have to be light. It just has to be told. At Groma True Stories, we tell the stories they tried to bury. Not to reopen wounds, but to honor the truth that we were wounded, and we still rose. We speak for the single mothers, for the daughters left behind, for the wives who were told they were too sensitive, for the children who thought they were someone's mistake. And we grow to learn that we are not the mistake. We are proof that survival has a voice. And when we speak, we begin to be free. If you're listening now, and something aches inside you, maybe you too have a story no one knows. Let me be the first to believe you. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories, not because I have the answers, but because I know some questions deserve to be heard. And I'm still here, still speaking, still willing to sit with the truth and call it by its name. Grandma True Stories, where we don't need to scream to be heard, we just need to begin with something honest, because justice has no expiration date, and survival doesn't need permission. I survived. You will too.